Chris Anthony, Streams of Light podcast. So happy to be with you here. Kind of a chilly day in Southern California here. Weather is different for us. We had a lot of water coming out of the sky today. It was raining. So, but happy to be here on the Streams of Light podcast. You ever wonder why people say the or the? I was thinking about that today. The versus the. Usually when you want attention for something, you say, no, it's the whatever, the Streams of Light podcast, or I am the one. We're gonna open up opportunity to call into the podcast today. We're going to be looking at the age-old question, which is probably more recent. And the movie The Matrix made this question even more relevant. The question is, do we live in a matrix? Do we live in a virtual reality world, a matrix? I'm going to open this up for all of my friends on Quora and anyone else who listens and subscribes to the podcast. I will put the number down in chat, but for those of you who are on Quora, the call-in number is in the announcement that I'm going live right now. So the number is there. And if you do call in and the phone picks up, but you just hear me rambling, just hang on and I'll be with you and we can discuss these things. I will put the number in chat, but for those in the meantime who are thinking about calling in, you can do that at 858-367-3765. That's not my real number, so don't call me in the middle of the night, but that is 858-367-3765. I haven't tested in a while, but it's my Gmail number, so we'll see if that works. So happy to have you here on the podcast today. As we look at just all things spiritual. Streams of Light podcast is a podcast that is for the seeker or for the person who is looking to find out maybe a little bit more about the meaning of life and the spiritual, deeper spiritual things. We are on the path. We haven't announced that we have arrived, but we are looking, and we're looking for the fellow friends who are on the path with us and are walking towards Zion. So anyways, that's the scoop. We stream on YouTube. So join the YouTube channel, Facebook Live, and then Twitter and Twitch. So glad to have you today. And, this is Matrix Month. I don't know about you, but I am a huge fan of not only film, but The Matrix, the movie that came out in 1999. It's kind of crazy to think that it's been over 2 decades since that movie came out. Man, what a movie The Matrix turned out to be. It turned out to be, just a great kind of like sci-fi action film, a lot of fighting. It entertains people, even if you're not looking for the deeper truths. The Matrix is definitely a cool film, but then there's all these super cool symbolic meanings in there, some of which we're going to kind of look at today. So the Matrix, a software world that people didn't know they were living in a virtual world. They were actually living in a power plant for AI. AI had taken over the world, caused some sort of like nuclear holocaust. And so the world was in a terrible situation, and all these humanoids were tucked away in these little battery cell compartments, feeding the machines, the artificial intelligence, and they were given a software reality, a software sort of existence, a virtual reality, if you will. And they were living in that world, not knowing that their bodies were actually somewhere else. Their bodies were somewhere else. It's quite a thing. It's quite a thing to think about. I've thought about that oftentimes. And as we are progressing on this path of getting to know who are we, where are we? Where are we going? What is life about? Science is actually starting to dovetail with this idea. One of the most famous authors, I would say, he's a New York Times bestseller, and he is a scientist of sorts. I shouldn't say of sorts. He's Carlo Rovelli. He's famous, and he's done many great books. One about time, and another one recently about how Einstein was right in more ways than one. Time is not only relative to gravity, so time is not constant, right? That's what Einstein discovered. But the new discovery is that reality is relative as well. So things are relative to your experience, and even like things like your sense perceptions, your organs, your eyes, your ears, and all those things. So everything really, in a very real way, everything that you are doing right now, if you're listening to this podcast, even the very thing you're hearing is, it's an audio feed, but it's coming into your ears and that is going into your brain. And so even that in and of itself is going through the filter of this reality that is sort of you and how you perceive things. And even sight, we see things, but really, we're not really actually seeing the real thing. We're seeing light, we're seeing photons, we're seeing, the sun shine upon someone, but this is going into our eyes and into our brain. And we're getting a mental representation of what we would say a physical reality is. But reality is so, it's really so dang relative, isn't it? Reality is unbelievably relative based on your perceptions, not only what you see and hear, but what you think. See, that is the biggest thing we're going to talk about today. Reality is more based on what you think in your mind than what actually is. It's something that I've brought up many times, and I would like to discuss it with you. I'm telling you what, I'm going to, let's see here. If I could, if you're out there, please do me a favor. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, whatever, like the podcast and send me a chat. Let me know where you're viewing from. Let's get the chats going and let's get this thing trending. So back to The Matrix. The Matrix is a great movie that came out in 1999 with Keanu Reeves. And this movie was such an amazing movie in that it portrayed Neo. Neo means new. That's the name of his software character. That was not his name in the real world. He was, of course, Mr. Anderson. You might remember that. Good evening, Mr. Anderson. He was actually Thomas Anderson in the movie. Maybe a little bit of a doubting Thomas in the beginning until he took the red pill after he followed the white rabbit down the rabbit hole that led him into a very disturbing reality, a reality that was maybe very hard to accept, a reality that sent him into a psychological backspin. Do you remember the scene in which Neo finally figured out what was really going on? And he was just blown away by it. He was disturbed by this reality. And the reality was that what he thought was real in the past was not really real. What he thought to be reality, this software world that he had lived in, turned out to be all a figment of not just his imagination, but the machine-generated reality. And that reality was pleasing because he was used to it, but it was disturbing when he found out the real story. The real story is that he wasn't awake. The real story was that he was not conscious of his own surroundings. The real story was that Neo had to have a greater awakening, that he was asleep in the software world, and at the same time that his energy was being sucked out of his very real self and being used by these machines, this AI. And I think a lot of people who go through spiritual awakenings have a very similar experience, right? Is the Matrix, is it not just like a commentary on, isn't the Matrix a commentary on a spiritual awakening in general, maybe a Kundalini awakening, or maybe just a spiritual path? You might not even call it that. It might be another path, but isn't that what happens when we go through this awakening? We feel this incredible joy sometimes of discovery that, wow, all these things existed that I didn't know existed. But at the beginning, it's very disturbing. And the beautiful part of the movie, The Matrix, was that Neo, once he woke up to reality and he realized that this thing called the Matrix was real in the sense that it was, kind of where everyone was living, and it was real in the sense that it wasn't necessarily going to just go away, but it was this kind of like alternate reality within reality, if you will, another dimension within the greater dimension. Once he realized that, oh man, it was huge. He was able to then what? Go into the matrix and sort of, as Morpheus said, bend the rules in some cases and even break them. And I think that is just an amazing perspective. That's an amazing perspective because it's like when you realize how powerful the mind is in this life, when you realize that perhaps things weren't always what you thought and that your mind is defining so many things, and you realize a very big secret, like Neo realized, that you have more power over your present situation than perhaps you ever thought before. And that's the beautiful story of this earth. If we are, and I'm interested in what you think, if we are in a matrix situation, maybe albeit not like the one that Neo was in, but if we are in a very, similar kind of situation where we're living in this reality that is not necessarily what we thought, but we're waking up to it, then the big question isn't so much like, oh man, it's not like, what have I been missing? Or, Neo got sick and he lost his lunch and he was stressing and he was realizing he had all these these holes in him from the power, the power lines. Instead of looking at the what we were missing perspective and the troubled side of it, like, oh my gosh, I've been asleep all my life in this little battery compartment. Instead of looking at it like that, the way to look at it is, oh my gosh, I can bend the spoon. No way. I can not only not run from bullets, once I figure out what's going on, I won't have to. And I don't know if you remember in the Matrix Reloaded, at one point he shot into the sky like he did in the last scene in the Matrix, and the guys in the control center said, "Where's Neo?" And they said, "Oh, he's playing Superman again." I mean, in a way, when you look at the Matrix reality and what we have here in our lives, that reality can be fun in the sense of, I'll give you an example. When I was learning energy work in the beginning, when I was learning how to do Reiki energy work, one of the things that happened for me was, as the teacher was teaching us about energy, I learned that we could take this energy and just sort of, see if I can get my hands up here. We could sort of visualize this energy and make like a ball of energy. And you can kind of feel it. You've got heat. Obviously, heat is energy. But as you begin to hone in on energy work, whether it's through your meditation practice or Reiki or whatever, you can begin to play with the energy. And then see, once you enter that realm where you're like, oh yeah, sky's the limit. Now it changes everything. Instead of looking at the holes, where you were attached to the power plugs and, the medulla plug in the back, what do they do now? They use that, right? They use that to go back into the software world, and they use that to travel and, to go in and eat at your favorite noodle house or whatever. But anyway, so that's the interesting thing about living in a matrix. It's not really so bad. Really, within you is the source. Within your being is the source of life. Life is within you. So no matter what your external circumstances is, you can always go back and tap the divine person within you, that divine seed. I was writing on Quora today for some of my friends, and I get these little inspirational quotes, and I put them up, and sometimes I put a few comments. And one of the things I put in there was that, you can take a time out at any time in the day to breathe divinity, to sort of crack the seed of divinity within you. You can breathe the breath of life. You can saturate yourself in soul essence, in your own soul, or divine essence, or however you call it, God, Holy Spirit, Kundalini Shakti, call it whatever you want, but you can access that as often as you need it. And one of the things that I mentioned to some of the Quora folks that I interact with quite a bit, because a lot of them are talking about relationships and a lot of them are talking about life challenges and struggles and things like that. And a lot of people that find me for some reason or other, and I get it, a lot of the people that find me are going through challenging times. So whether you're watching this live now or whether you tuned in after the fact and you're just watching this YouTube video, the one thing I want to say, because I think there's going to be people who've just read that post and I said, contact me, message me down below or DM me, or now you're listening to the podcast. How do you crack the seed of divine essence within you? How do you breathe in the breath of life? How do you receive the Holy Spirit? How do you stir up the gift that is within you? How do you have rivers of living water from deep within your being? How do you get that to flow? How do you eat the bread that falls down from heaven? How do you get the Spirit to fall upon you or come upon you? These are the questions. And every different faith family across the world has their own methods for these things. And unfortunately, sometimes different groups, not all of them, can be kind of tribal and say, hey, this is the way to do it. And you got to get it through our group. That's not always the case. I don't care what people say. That's not the case. But what is the case? The case is most likely almost all the methods work to some degree or other, more or less. What we all need to do as spiritual seekers is find our home in one of these sort of houses. In my Father's world, there are many mansions. There's many houses. I have other sheep that are not in this fold, right? That was what was said in the Western upbringing for many of us in Western spirituality. So get in one of the houses that you feel comfortable. It's like when you go, to a hotel. Sometimes you go to a hotel and you're like, dang, why did I get this hotel? This place sucks. The energy doesn't feel good, or the view's not right, or it's drafty or whatever. But then if you've ever been in a place, whether it be a hotel or a B&B or maybe someone's house where it feels right, you're like, oh, this is good. You feel goodness. That feeling that you have when you find the right lodgings, the feeling of goodness, like you're in the right place. That's the feeling you want when you find your tribe, when you find the spiritual house that you're going to be part of. So you find that place. Once you know you're home, you'll feel it. You'll feel good. You'll feel like, man, this feels right. And then what you do, once you feel like you're at home, then you lean on those who have gone before you, the spiritual elders. And those spiritual elders will lead you in the way. Now, the way I have, and I've tried more than one, and they all sort of work, and it's like a meal. They all have different sort of flavors to them. And just like meals have different after effects. So, if you get some fast food, you might feel kind of like a little bloated, maybe a little too much fat, maybe not enough nutrients or protein, So, some places are kind of like that. You feel like, hey, it's kind of there. I got some substance, but doesn't feel quite right. And then there's other times you eat a really good meal and you're just like, wow, I am not weighed down. There's no inflammation and I feel empowered to move, to work. And so if you're in the right house, you will probably feel like the method of spiritual infusion is right. So you find your place. So what I've settled on is pranayama and meditation, which, by the way, meditation is practiced in all the faith families. Even those in the West who are part of an organized group who kind of looks down on meditation, even though they might look down on it, a lot of these groups have monasteries, and monks who meditate. So they just don't know. It just might be a little ignorance on their part. But meditation is pretty much practiced universally, worldwide. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason to be still and know, and to open the eyes of your heart, out of your mind, and to get the energy, to stir up that spirit and get the energy flowing. So one of the ways I crack the divine seed of presence and blessing is I do that through breath work. But it's not just simple breath work. It may start out simple. It may start out with just a simple pranayama method that you read about on the internet or see a YouTube video. But what I've found is that it's not so important that you find the exact one that works for you. You will get those things down later. The most important thing is just to do it. Just to do it on a regular basis. Because what'll happen, it's like any other task you do. Like if you do a task around the home daily, your brain just sort of figures out what to do. Creates those neural pathways. You're putting away dishes. And then as time goes on, you just kind of get better at it. You go, I'm going to grab all the plates, save time. And that's the way the mind and the body is. You create those neural pathways and then you just get better at it. You get more efficient. And even though the mind is relentless and it doesn't want to shut up when you're trying to meditate, do you know that feeling? I know that feeling. I've been doing it for a long time and it still doesn't want to shut up. But what I found is eventually the mind gets better at it. It gets better and better. And it's nice to throw the mind a bone. Give it something. Give it something in the beginning. Give it some breath ratios, some, 1-1 ratio or 1-1-1 ratio, or a vagus nerve breathing, like a 1-to-2 ratio, like a breathe in 4 seconds, breathe out 8 seconds. Do that kind of stuff and do it for a while. And as you're doing it, lengthen it. So if you start out with the vagus nerve breathing, the heart rate variability breathing, and if you start out like with an inhale of 4 counts and then an exhale of 8, then lengthen that. Lengthen that to 8 and 16 and keep lengthening it. And you will find that you begin to enter into the mystical world of energy, of subtle matter, which is in your body and which is around your body. You begin to tap that. That's how you start to tap the divine seed. That's how you begin to breathe the breath of life, is through these practices. And you will be helped. You're not alone. I mean, whether you're a Buddhist and you don't really believe in a anthropomorphic, I get it. A lot of Buddhists don't believe in the kind of concept of God in the anthropomorphic sense. Like God is sitting on a chair in heaven with white hair, and all the prophets saw visions like that. So that's something, and they don't like that. I get that. But even if you're a Buddhist, and you don't even have to want to do energy work, but no matter what you do, a lot of the Buddhist monks, they chant, and the chantings are powerful. I have found chanting is, sound is vibration, and vibration just stirs everything up, and there's infusions that happen. So you practice these things, and that's how you crack the seed of soul essence and breathe the breath of life. And so I'm excited about how these things progress, how we can all progress in the how we can progress on the spiritual path. And I really want to know what you think. I'm going to give the number out here in a second, and I'm trying to pull up there we go. We've got 22 minutes and counting. We got a couple people watching live. If you're interested in calling into the podcast, I'm going to give you the number. We don't really do a lot of call-ins, but I think it's time to do that. I hope this number is working. If it's not working, send me a chat and let me know, and then I'll figure out another way. But if you want to call in to talk about the Matrix, because man, we got a lot of stuff going on. We got the Matrix Resurrections. Matrix Resurrections is coming out December 19th. Are you back watching the old Matrix? You should be. That's what I'm doing. I'm getting ready for it, man. I want to be ready when like Neo goes, man, they got a new Morpheus. That's kind of a bummer, but yeah, so we got a lot of things happening right now. We got the Matrix coming out. We got Christmas coming up. If you ever needed to crack the divine essence and breathe the breath of life, man, you need to do it for Christmas, And then we've got, what else do we have going on? Well, we have the winter solstice coming up in just a couple days after Matrix Resurrections comes out. So there's a lot happening, and humanity's always pushing onward and upward. So there's always something to talk about. So if you would like to call in, give me a ring. I will pick up, and then when I'm ready, I'll bring you in. The number to call is 858-367-3765. I'm going to give that again. 858-367-3765. Now, if you call and I pick up, but I don't say hello, it's just because I've got you on mute and I'm getting my bearings straight. I'm producing this thing on the fly. So, I mean, that's why I got my reading glasses on. I got to look down at my equipment, got to look at the camera, got a ring light up here, got 2 cats, got my squirt bottle ready, in case they decide they want to just, be catty with me. So yeah, Matrix, I'm amazed. Let's go back to the Matrix for a minute. Matrix, what a amazing movie. There's so much symbolism in the Matrix. The original Matrix from 99 was just full of rich symbolism. Again, Neo, the main character, very messianic. So we have I always used to think there was more Eastern symbolism in the Matrix than I did think that there was Western spiritual symbolism. But, after watching it again, I've seen it many times, but after watching it the other day, I thought, you know what? I think there might be more Western spirituality influence in the Matrix than Eastern. In the beginning, I thought Eastern, and too much, because at the time I was kind of, this was 2 decades ago. We all change a lot, right? We evolve, we progress. And back then I was thinking, oh man, what is this stuff? Like when Morpheus gives Neo the speech of like, what is real, when they're in the training program and they're doing like judo or karate or kung fu. I think it was kung fu. I was like, when he said, what is reality? What is real? I was like, I don't know. That's kind of like Eastern and everything. But as I look at it, the Matrix is full of so much of Western spirituality, because Neo, they kept calling, Morpheus was like kind of starstruck by Neo, wasn't he? He's like, he kept calling him the one, you're the one. He took him to the oracle. The oracle is a term that we read in in Judaism. The Jewish tribe believed in this sort of the prophets, the oracle of the Lord, so to speak, and they really relied on the prophets. And so there's all this, and then of course when Neo would come, when the one would come, what would he do? He would do things that no one else ever did. Very Christ-like, right? Very Christ-like. He would be able to sort of manipulate the system, the elements. Very, very Western Christianity-like. And then, of course, Trinity and Zion. So Trinity, his girlfriend, I find this interesting. If you think about it, Neo, when he died, now this is the old one, so I'm not giving any spoilers away. If you haven't seen the first Matrix by now, I'm not going to apologize about spoilers on that. It's 2 decades old. Neo, when he died, when his heart stopped, even the Mr. Anderson guy, the guy who hated him and always fought him, the main program sentry guy, said, I saw him. I saw you. You were dead. Your heart stopped. What happened? He raised himself up, like in the Western spiritual texts. The Christ said, destroy this temple in 3 days. I will what? Raise it up. So very, very Christian-esque there. But what raised him up? He was dead. And then on the other side, when he was in the chair, Trinity, that's a very Christian term. Trinity kissed him. God kissed the Son, so to speak. And what happened? Love brought him to life. Very, very, very Western. Very, very cool, though. I mean, if you think about it, really, really cool. And then he came back to life. And of course, what happened after he sort of was resurrected in the first Matrix? Oh, that's when he really woke up to who he was. I mean, he was already progressing, but when he woke up to who he really was, remember the bullets came in him and he just kind of looked down and after he stood up in his resurrected form, all the bullets just popped out. And then of course they shot at him, and what did he do? He held his hand up and they all stopped, and he kind of looked at one very contemplatively. He looked at the so-called weapon. What did he realize? It's not a weapon. It's not. It's like what the little kid said in the room waiting for the oracle. He goes, don't think that you're separate from the spoon, but just realize you can't bend the spoon. Realize that you and the spoon are the same, one and the same. So he looked at that bullet, and I think, oh my gosh, if we could get even that scene when he looks at the bullet, if we could just get that, if we could just get that one little scene of the bullet as he contemplatively looks at what before was his biggest fear. What was his biggest fear? Death. And the bullet was the messenger of death. It was the instrument whereby you were shot and killed. And what did he do? He just contemplatively sort of looked at it, and they all just fell to the ground. And that's when those demons, those programs, those guys, those, help me out here. What do they call those guys? I can't think of it. Send me it in chat. But those guys who were against him, those antagonists, that's when they realized their weapons were no good. See, what does that speak of? Your demons only have power, what? Inasmuch as you give them power. The power they look for, the power that people who want to rule over you and steal your energy and confine you and make you afraid, the only power they have is in reality the power that you give them. Isn't that true? That's what I've learned as I've gone on in life. What I've learned is people only have the power that you give them. If you fear something, someone now has energetic tension when they pull on that chain, when they're trying to yank your chain. If there's no fear, if there's no ego, if you're a master of your own body and your own mind, guess what happens when they go to yank that chain? They hurt their arm. It's like trying to throw a wiffle ball. They'll throw their arm out when they're yanking the chain. Because why? There's no tension on it. There's no fear. There's no ego. That's the fuel of torment. And your enemies, be it external, so-called friends, people you work with, relatives, whatever, or if those demons are not external people, most people have more demons in their own noggin, their own head. That's why we say personal demons, right? Like when someone's struggling, we go, yeah, he or she, wow, they've got a lot of personal demons. We create those people. Those demons only have power because we've given them power. And they don't even have, in reality, think about how many things in your life, as you get older, you start to realize this, in multiplied ways. But think about how many things never happened that you thought might happen. Think about how many things you worried about, you fretted over, you stressed over that never came to pass. Why? They weren't real. Yeah, sometimes bad things come our way. Or are they bad? Maybe it's how we interpret them. Because even the times that we usually interpret things as bad when they are difficult or painful, right? Then we label it. In the dualistic world, we label, oh, that was terrible. That was bad. In some cases, we say that was evil. Yeah. I mean, when someone kills someone for no good reason, yeah, I understand why we have labels like that. But in every situation where we've had pain, suffering, quote unquote, bad or evil things happen, most every time, not every time, but most every time, particularly with those on the path, I find that those things actually better that person. It's amazing how to bring nutrients to plants, we use manure. It's kind of crazy how a pot of flowers will grow better when there's shit in the soil. Do you ever think about that? That's amazing. That manure, the crappy things in life, so to speak, ends up being the good fuel for beautification of the organic object. It's crazy. So Neo, man, I think he's a type of all of us. In that movie, they really focused on the one. And I don't know if you remember in the second movie, they sort of would leave things outside the door, like it was a little shrine. And I get it. Because, for example, if you lived in the time of Christ and let's say you had a child who was sick and the doctors couldn't do anything and you besought Jesus to heal that child of yours, if he did that, of course you'd be grateful. Of course you would want to go and bring your offering of gratitude. That's good and fine. But I think one of the things that we're waking up to as we evolve, right? As we're evolving right now on this path, what are we waking up to? we're waking up to actually the Christ phrase that he said, you're going to do greater things than me. That's kind of interesting. We can still leave our offerings outside the door of someone who's done something wonderful and unthinkable and miraculous in our current terms and definition of miraculous, because that changes over time, doesn't it? But the real awakening that we're just about to embark on is how can we, as people, how can we wake up to our potential? What if the matrix is not so much about the one guy who comes in to fight the machines and the sentries, but what if the matrix is about all of us interacting with who? Morpheus. Why Morpheus? Change. Metamorphosis. Right? Morpheus is the one who comes and tells you, you are the one. Trinity, the representation of the divine, is the one who kisses you and says, I love you, and that brings something to life that was gone. Awakening to what was going on in your life that you weren't aware of, being in a battery chamber, having others suck your energy out while you lived in an unreal world of perceptions. This is the story of humanity. This is our story. A friend and I were talking the other day about how if we were to write sacred texts today, almost like they did years and years ago, that we have in the holy books in each of the religions, where would those writings come from? Would they come from the commentaries of the preachers and the pastors and the priests and the gurus? Or perhaps would they come from the songwriters, like the songwriters of the 70s or the songwriters of current day? Or would they come from the movies like The Matrix and others? I wonder, because if you think about it, that might sound unholy to people who are really religious, but you know what? King David, who wrote many of the Psalms, he was a musician of his time. And many of the things that we heard in song in the Psalms, they were speaking deeper truths of things that hadn't yet been revealed. And I can't say he was a partier, but he was definitely a murderer and adulterer. So most people in today's standards would have disqualified him. But amazing. These things that we're awaking to now, they come through any form to the open heart and the open mind. The seeds that are scattered with the understanding of the divine are floating through the sky. They're coming from everywhere. They're coming from songs. They're coming from movies. They're coming from, I've watched so many YouTube videos that are it's increasing, people. It needs to increase now. We need awakening. We need to wake up and see where we're at. Where are we at in this world? What are we doing? Is now a time to spend all our money for weapons of warfare? Is now a time to invest in things that are destroying or fixing the planet and the problems? Awakening is being preceded by an influx of spiritual infusion. And I am really, really excited for the season we're coming into. The season we're coming into is downright amazing. It's an amazing season. It's becoming a world of decentralization where, yes, we still have government. We still have banks. We still have the ranks of military, but everything is shifting so fast right now with the increase of the information age. The world that will be here 10 and 20 years from now, I believe, will be almost unrecognizable. Crypto, decentralized finance taking off globally. Governments worry about it. They want to regulate it, but really, they can't really stop it because it's a worldwide movement. It's like in those movies when you see prisoners or an army, and you see people that are afraid and they're in prison. They're people are lording it over them, right? And you think, gosh, if they just knew, if they all stood together, if they all stood up and stood together all at once, nothing could stop them. But not in the bad sense, but in the good sense. That's where we're at right now. We are at an amazing crossroads. Everything is about to change financially, technologically, robotics, intelligence in being integrated into technology, not just AI and the fear of some big machines taking over the world, but really advancements, medicine, ecologically. We're going to see advancements in the ecology based on these neural networks of information sharing and AI actually running different possibilities to fix different problems, to modify and to change and to heal. Autonomous driving, rockets, back to the moon, off to Mars. There are so many changes that we are on the brink of right now. It's really phenomenal when you think about it. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about, more than anything though, I'm excited about those things that are just right here. And that's really what I'm all about in this podcast. When I think about the people who tune in, I think about all of us growing together. You know, it's like when I talked about pranayama and cracking that divine seed and inhaling the breath of life. So many people struggling without really breathing, unnecessarily in pain based on perceptions and perceived ideas. My goal is that we all come in touch with who we are at the core of our being. And that is quite remarkable. I can say, as a spiritual pilgrim on the path of self-discovery, that there is so much to be delved into and so much to be learned about our own energy bodies and our own energetic field. And this will lead to many blessings in your own life. I don't know about you, but I do not want to be a prisoner of my body anymore. You know, Swami Vivekananda said that King's soul needs to rule over the body. I love that statement because when our soul rules over our body, we begin to experience who we really are in the divinity of our higher selves. We are not a body. We're living in a house that we call a body. When that gets in check, it just becomes powerful. Soul existence takes predominance. And now we are discovering, oh my gosh, in this energy body, and I just felt an influx right now, in this energy body, there is bliss, inexhaustible bliss, peace, wisdom. In this place, there's no limit to understanding and contentment and control over ourselves. Our bodies are composed of energy, whirling atoms, molecules. The mind, being tamed, becomes a great asset to this thing called life. Gosh, we're just getting underway here. I'm so thankful for those of you who've joined me on the podcast today. This is Streams of Light. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you've enjoyed this. Send me a message. Let me know where you listened from, what you liked, what you want to hear. That's just a walk in the park today, the park of life. And I'm glad you've joined me. I hope you will join me again. And next time, I hope we can get some people to maybe call in, share their experiences, so we can all do this together. I'm Chris Anthony. This is Streams of Life. And we'll see you next time around. Thanks for joining me.